Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Professor, can we turn our mind now to post-election, where we've had a change of government? Do you recall, your minister is the Attorney General? Is it my understanding?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, do you know? Do you have an independent recollection of when you may have first mentioned to the attorney that you had made your mind up to conduct an inquiry?
I don't, but we will have a written record of that and we will provide that information to you.
Well, so let me ask the question then a slightly different way. Do you have a recollection of when you, by when you had at least had a conversation with the attorney?
No, I don't, and I'll have to take that on notice.
I assume, am I entitled to assume that it wasn't on the day the inquiry was announced?
I think you can assume that.
Yeah.
Announce that publicly as well.
Senator O'Sullivan, I might be able to help, if I may.
That would be appreciated, Minister.
Because during the afternoon tea adjournment, I did check my records, and I'm having the documents brought to the committee room now so that there will be copies for me, and I propose to table them, so that there will be copies for all members of the committee to inspect. And if those in my office are listening to this, can they hurry and get the documents here so we don't have any undue delay? But
Just on that,
first,
Senator Seward has some questions of the Commission after Senator O'Sullivan. So.
The first indication I had from Professor Triggs of the inquiry was when I received, thank you Mr Brennan, when I received from her a letter of the 22nd of January 2014, which I will table, and of which I have multiple copies here. I'll give a copy to Professor Triggs. And there's one for you, Senator O'Sullivan, and one for the Secretary, so there's a spare copy here as well. So that letter of the 22nd of January 2014 indicates, well, it speaks for itself. It indicates that Professor Triggs is writing to advise that the Commission has decided to conduct an inquiry into children in immigration detention, and it describes the inquiry. It annexes the proposed terms of reference, and she says at the foot of the first page of the letter, I have also written today to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection to advise him of the inquiry. So that's the first notice I had of the inquiry.
So, thank you for that, Attorney. Let me return to you, Professor Triggs. Is it fair to characterise that a decision taken in the June of 2013 by yourself and with the consensus of the Commission, it would seem from your testimony, is first conveyed to the Minister, to the Attorney General by this communique? Does that help you refresh your recollection of how you communicated and when you communicated?
I think it's very clear evidence of when I communicated, yes.
So my statement goes unchallenged that a decision taken by you and the Commission in the June of 2013 is conveyed to your Minister, your Attorney, the Attorney, on the 22nd of January 2014.
Well,
Question's a simple practical one. Was there any, did you convey your decision of June to the Attorney any time between then and the 22nd of January? We'll go on to ask you why you did not if you did not, but I'm interested just in the link.
I think I had conversations with the Minister or the Secretary over those months, but
Just
when
Minister?
it was... No, because they weren't yet in power, but with the then Minister.
So just to help me focus, so my question to you, I must say, Professor Triggs, is about the Attorney. We'll get on, I promise you, we will make our way to the Minister and anybody else who you may have shared it with.
The current Minister, the current Attorney.
The current Attorney?
Yes. I advised, as this letter demonstrates, on the 22nd of January.
Okay, so perhaps I'll ask my question rhetorically. It's not challenged that a decision taken by you in the June of 2013 is not conveyed to your minister, your attorney, the Attorney General, should I say, until the 22nd of January 2014, and you're not asserting that any time in that almost 7 month period, make it 6 months amongst our mates, 6 month period, did you indicate in any other form to the attorney that you had made your mind up about an inquiry into children in detention, the immigration detention?
No, I'll have to take it on notice.
Your earlier evidence. Well, sorry, you're not contesting that you'd made your mind up in June and told.
No, I am contesting that. I think we made a decision within the Commission, but I will have to take it on notice because it would be demonstrable on the minutes the state of the Commission's mind, if I can put it that way, in June.
Well, I'm
when
looking...
I've clarified that and when I'm back in the office, then I will know exactly what the nature of that determination was. But I'm insofar as advising the current attorney, I only advised him when I had given, in my own mind, time for the new government to adjust its policies, and I became aware in January of the figures, and that's when we decided to go forward with the inquiry. So exactly when we were going to go forward was a matter for determination.
Well, tell me, Professor, in waiting for the government to adjust its policies, and we know that the adjustments that occurred were positive, so whatever was your concern at the point in June it diminishes over time. That's a given. The stats are there to support that. On a diminishing arc, you're waiting for something to happen, and indeed what does happen is, I would assert, and others might support me, very positive outcomes with the change of policy. You're waiting for those positive outcomes to get to some critical low before you decide to tell the attorney, who you're responsible to report your activities to, that you're going to conduct an inquiry. Is that a fair description of what happened?
No, I don't believe it is.
All right. So now, Professor, you mentioned in the exchange, in the passage then, that you had some discussions with another minister. Would that be the Minister for Immigration?
That's correct.
Yeah. So when did you, because that was in the context of when did you advise who about what, are you now, was that you advised the Minister of your intention to hold the inquiry into children into detention?
What is the question?
When you alluded that you'd had a conversation with another minister, not the attorney, in relation to your decision to conduct the inquiry into children in immigration detention, were you referring to the Minister for Immigration?
I think yes, I was.
Okay. So...
the then Minister.
Yeah. So is it to follow that you advise the Minister for Immigration of your intention to conduct an inquiry before you advise the attorney to whom you report as a department or as a entity?
I think this letter indicates that I advised both ministers, both the Attorney and the Minister for Immigration at the same time.
So your assertion before that you'd had conversations and had a discussion about it with another minister was meant to be all on the one day, the 22nd of January 2014?
Well, again, I must take it on notice, but I know that over that period, over that summer period, I had a meeting with Minister Scott Morrison, and I know this subject came up and we discussed it, but I think it was not until within days of the 22nd of January that the final determination would have been made. But I certainly had discussions with the Minister Scott Morrison, and then before the election, discussions with the two previous ministers of immigration.
So your state of mind is we're going to have an inquiry. You've then had a discussion with the Minister Morrison about that. I imagine not a discretionary discussion. I've made my mind up with the Commission back in June or February.
I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you're simply stating the question on a false premise.
Well, here's a very simple one, because this might allow us to, and hopefully it doesn't bring a third date into the exercise. Professor Triggs, to the best of your recollection, when is it that you made a decision to conduct an inquiry into children in immigration detention?
A final and determinative period was within a day or so of the 22nd of January 2014, was when a decision was made to hold the inquiry. A final decision was made. And that's when I advised both the Minister and the Attorney.
Professor Triggs, when I asked you earlier whether you'd discussed this with the Minister or the then Minister, you said no, you hadn't. You were talking about the Attorney rather than the Immigration Minister, were you? Because I think you've just said now you did discuss it with the previous ministers.
I've discussed it with, I think, Minister Tony Burke, the possibility, and I discussed it...
Was he the Immigration Minister?
He was briefly before the change of government. And so I met with him and raised this as an intention for 2014.
I thought when I asked you that before, you said no, you hadn't discussed it with ministers.
Well,
See,
maybe there's some
that's evidence
confusion.
you've given
but,
2 or 3 times.
I have discussed it. I have discussed the possibility of an inquiry with Minister Chris Bowen and with Minister Tony Burke, but they were possibilities of inquiries for 2014, but I could not make an absolute determination because we were in the middle of an election, and I didn't know whether or not I would need to do if the policy was.
Can't have been in the middle of the election.
Chair,
both Tony Burke and
well, it was an election period. I think
Chris Bowen were ministers because they weren't ministers in the election period.
Well,
this is significant. Your test.
Hang on, Senator O'Sullivan. Yes, I
think
agree.
the Minister Burke was the minister for a matter of weeks, just leading up and through the caretaker period, and I had at least one meeting with him. And I discussed, but very informally, because I didn't know where this was going to go.
But you wouldn't have been discussing it with the minister in the caretaker period.
Well, I met with him over that period briefly, and I think it was...
That's entirely inappropriate, as you know. I mean, the caretaker period is a caretaker period for obvious reasons, and you don't discuss...
Well, I think I'm going to have to take this on notice because the precise dates are not clear in my mind. All I know is that I had... fairly regular meetings with each of the ministers over the period from about...
But you told me before that you didn't.
I didn't say I didn't meet with them.
Remember I said I'm not going to ask you what the advice was.
Yes.
I'm asking you whether you actually spoke with them, and you said no and no and no.
I think we're going around in a misunderstanding way. I have not advised them in any formal sense that I will be holding an inquiry, but in my informal discussions with them, it was raised as a possibility that we would hold one for 2004.
Some advice from them on when would be an appropriate time to have an inquiry.
Chair,
I certainly didn't ask for their advice as to when I should hold it, because that's my decision.
Okay, sorry, Senator O'Sullivan, I interrupted you, but you're just about out of your 15 minutes, and I'll come back to you if you want to.
This is Groundhog Day for me now. I'm sorry, Chair.
Well, if you're close to the finish, I'll allow it. Otherwise, you'll have to come back.
Well, I'm not close to the finish, so but it might pay us to just tidy up on this line of questioning while it's fresh in Professor Triggs' mind.
Well, if you can
the
do it
dates
very
don't
briefly.
escape her again. It's your call, Chair. I'm easy.
No, if you can do it if you can do it in the next couple of minutes, but otherwise...
Professor Triggs, I questioned you quite intently earlier about recollections about whether you had spoken to any minister, and a passage of that was in particular to ministers of the former government, and you indicated to me that you had no recollection of having had discussions with them in relation to this inquiry. Well, Hansard will prove that. Here's an opportunity. In the break, were you able to refresh your memory from a diary, from advice from an officer of the Commission or any other place to allow you now to come back, and we're now talking about Chris Bowen and Tony Burke?
I will go back to my office and we will go through all our records and get a full chronological record of those that I spoke to and raised this matter with.
Well, please, you'll do that. But my question is, in the break, My questions are specific.
I have nothing. I've got no further information in the break.
But your memory has improved during the break because you now remember discussing it with Chris Bowen and Tony Burke.
I do remember discussing with every minister that I've dealt with either the possibility or the reality of an inquiry.
Well, I get that, but the ministers for whom you were responsible to after the election, you waited 6 months to talk to your minister after the election, but prior to the election or on your own testimony in the middle of the election,
Well,
when there's no, but you can clarify, you've had a conversation with Bowen and Burke concerning an inquiry that you're intending to hold after the election. You're having a bit of a chin wag about, listen, when this is over and if there's a change of government, and perhaps I shouldn't do that, let me withdraw that. When this is over, because I think it was quite clear what was going to happen, I'm going to have an inquiry into this in February.
Can I say that everything I've said on this subject of children in detention have been comments which apply to both the former government and the present government. And when the report is released in the public arena, you will see that everything I've said is completely bipartisan and non-political. It has nothing whatever to do with the politics.
Professor, I don't think your report will be worth 20 cents if we don't clear up what these discussions were, when they occurred, what the content of them was, with a prior government who had an atrocious record in this field, at a time when, on your testimony here, you've been burdened by this for up to a year by the time you're talking to Bowen and Burke, but still in all, not sufficient either to hold an inquiry then. You wait 6 months to advise the attorney to whom you are responsible. You talk to the opposition, but not the attorney or the government then. And you hold an inquiry. I think your report will be under serious question, the integrity of it, because this architecturally is very, very untidy in my view.
I assume that's a statement of your view. It's not something I
I'm leaving it open
for
you to respond.
Well, as I say, that is your view. It's a political perspective, and I am assuring you and the Australian public in this report that this is completely bipartisan, and the criticisms and concerns that I've had about the failure to abide by the principles of international law have been virtually identical for the former government as well as this government.
Did you ever make them known publicly?
I beg your pardon?
Did you ever make them known publicly, your concerns?
We have a full and complete record of these views, and indeed we've been checking our Commission advice on these matters for the last 20 years. It's been an absolutely consistent position. I have written endless op-eds for the public. I've spoken publicly. All our opinions, all our submissions, all our advisory work has been entirely consistent on the position at international law. And I really would urge this Senate committee to take or to give credit to the Commission over a very long time for an entirely consistent position across every government for 20 years on this question of detaining children. May I also...
But that's not our issue, Professor. The only thing that's been missing here today is consistency of your testimony.
Sorry, Senator O'Sullivan, at least let the Professor finish, then you can have a go. Had you finished?
I think that the thrust of the questions is to challenge the integrity of the Commission.
I think that's pretty clear.
I think that's pretty clear to everybody. I'm saying that there's no evidence of this, and that the Commission has been impeccable in its attempt to provide evidence for a very long time across numerous governments on this issue. We've been entirely consistent, and to argue that in any sense we have been lacking in objectivity or that we are biased is a most unfair and unsubstantiated.
Well, I'm not even prepared to make that
evidence
plural assertion, but I am prepared to make it where you're concerned, Professor Triggs. This has been the untidiest passage of evidence that I've seen